Hey, good afternoon to you. Mark Sutton with HurricaneTrack.com here. Wednesday now, the 27th day of December. Just 4 days left in 2023, and then we will be there. 2024. You like that background picture? Generated that in AI. A pretty stormy look to 2024, and hopefully it won't be that bad. But that gets the point across. We're going to be talking about 2024 in this update. At least the second two-thirds of it. The first third we will spend talking about current weather, a few things related to the tropics, and then we shall move on. Hope everybody's doing well. I know from our Discord, a lot of people are out there sick right now. COVID, other viruses spreading around, just annoying, absolutely. But I'm glad you're here with me today. Let's see what we've got. First of all, landfalls. Yeah, we had a hurricane season. It's funny how time flies and we forget about stuff. These are all the different landfalls in the Eastern Pacific and, of course, the Atlantic Basin. The big one for us was Idalia down here in the Big Bend area. And otherwise, that was pretty much it. We had Ophelia in eastern North Carolina, Harold over here in Texas. I was present. Our project was present at all three of these, plus Hillary, which eventually came into Southern California, spreading rain all across this area. That was a pretty big impact system overall. And then we had other systems down in the Caribbean of varying degrees and impacts, and you can see that reflected down here between Brett, Franklin, and Philippe. The big one in the East Pac, of course, Otis, and they are still recovering down there. We don't want to forget about that. Our friends in Acapulco, a devastating event for them. But we also had Max, Lydia, and Norma. I got some video that was shared with me from somebody that was on vacation down there with their family. I'm telling you, the power of social media, absolutely incredible. There's a lot of negativity around it, of course. Anything that powerful, you're going to have a dark side, and you're going to have a light side, or a more pleasant side, as it were. And we like to use the power of social media for benefit, sharing of ideas, and getting to know people. And that was incredible to get video during Norma down there in the Baja. I've not been down there myself yet. Maybe one day. Maybe one day we'll cover something down there. But that's the landfalls that we had. Don't want to forget Lee up there in parts of Atlantic Canada. Lee was a close call. Had the pattern been just a little bit different, it's always like that, right? Until it isn't. You know, we've seen it where the pattern is favorable for big landfalls. But had the pattern been just a little bit different, stronger ridge, less troughing, Lee could have come much farther to the west, and areas in New England would still be talking about Lee today, and probably for generations to come. That was a big hurricane, and we got very lucky. Will we be so lucky in 2024? We'll talk about that just a little bit as I wrap things up as we progress. All right? So what's going on out there today? Another blankish looking weather map overall. We do have some dense fog through here. That's the gray area. Some flooding issues in parts of the mid-Atlantic, and some winter weather advisories, I think is what that is there, in parts of the plains, and then some storm warnings and gale conditions out here along the coast of the Pacific Northwest, and then some high wind advisories in some of the mountain areas, some flooding issues, coastal flood problems along the coast. Other than that, winter in terms of big storms, crippling snows. I mean, yes, we did have blizzard conditions through some of this area recently. Denver just missed out on it because of the pattern. And yeah, it's just been kind of a blah winter so far. But like hurricane season, and it is really interesting how these two seasons mirror each other in a lot of ways, right? Big nor'easters are very similar to, in terms of their impacts, to hurricanes, except they are cold core systems driven by temperature differences in the atmosphere, whereas hurricanes derive their energy from the warm water, and they are warm core throughout. Otherwise, though, you get storm surges from winter storms, just like you can from hurricanes. You get big waves. You get the potentially hurricane force wind, certainly tropical storm gale force winds. There are a lot of similarities, but also climatologically speaking, December can be a big month. I mean, in 2010, we had the Boxing Day blizzard that affected parts of the Northeast. I remember that. I remember watching that live on one of our good friends' webcams that he had set up for us in Lower Manhattan. It literally looked like a real live version of the day after tomorrow out there. But sometimes you got to wait, you know, and it's just like in hurricane season. You're not always going to have a season like '05 or 2020 where it's just every 2 weeks you get a named storm or a hurricane threat. In the winter, sometimes climatology plays a big role, and you got to wait for the cold air to build and the pattern to change, and then you flood the lower 48 with that cold air. You get the different jet streams involved, the subtropical jet as well as the polar jet. You phase them with that cold air, bam, you've got yourself a big winter storm, or 2 or 3 or 4, like 2015. You guys remember that in Massachusetts? Took them all the way to July to melt all that snow in Boston. Climatology plays a role, as well as what we're dealing with in terms of the current climate. We have an El Nino right now, the short-term climate. So I think January into February, eventually the scale will tip, the cross-polar flow will ensue, and we will get a lot of cold air flooding the lower 48, and everybody's going to be like, I'm done with it. Let's get to spring. So enjoy this warm weather. It does make it easier to travel, although I did see there was some pretty nasty turbulence in parts of the southern states last night on some SIGMETs. I'm learning a little bit more about aviation weather, especially that Fox Weather does such a great job of covering that. And yeah, it just makes it easier to travel when the weather is pleasant. It makes energy bills lower, so forth and so on. But again, and I think this will be an interesting story to start tracking early next year, the lack of snow cover, the lack of cold, also affects a certain part of what we call the cold weather economy. So we'll talk about that too as we get into early 2024. A few news items for you. But basically, to start things off, the lower 48, pretty quiet, generally speaking, on the weather front. Looking at it from the satellite perspective, that looks almost like a dead hurricane over Missouri. You can just imagine, just pretend, and again, we're just pretending here that we had a big monster hurricane that came in and it made landfall near Freeport, and then it made its way up. That would look like a depression. If you took the front here off, that subtropical jet, kind of looks like a front. If you remove that, that's a dead giveaway that it's winter. And you took this out, and you said, okay, there's this over here, and I told you that was a tropical depression, you'd believe me. Yeah, okay, that makes sense. I mean, I guess you could figure it out from sun angles and the way the Terminator, that's this line here separating light from dark. There's other clues in there. Somebody like Neil deGrasse Tyson could probably figure out. But that really does look like a low-level swirl left over from a dead hurricane. But it's a big upper-level storm with a low-level surface low, and that is bringing inclement weather, some snow in some areas. Outside of that, though, the subtropical jet, very active. We just don't have a big major polar plunge to come in here and tap that, phasing it all together to give us a big Miller A storm to run up the East Coast. We just don't have that yet. A few other things to point out. Some snow cover out here in the Intermountain West through the Great Basin, the Sierras, but not nearly as much as we had last year. Maybe that will change. You can use all the moisture and snowpack that you can get out west for sure. It helps with your water situation currently and in the future. So when might the pattern change? Looking at the ensembles, this is the GEFS, the Ensemble Forecast System. Just scrolling out over the next several days or so, early next year, maybe the next 2 weeks, whatever. Let's go on out. Let's see if there are any signs of change. First of all, there's that big anomalous upper level low and surface low that's sitting over Missouri right now. And then you can clearly see why we've got that subtropical jet coming up out of the tropics over Mexico and the Gulf of Mexico. So when do things change? Well, let's see. Eventually, as we get towards the end of the year, we start to build more high pressure back up over the Northwest Territories, but not quite enough until we get into the first part of 24. Now we're starting to build these heights here up over Alaska, and that's what we need to do. We need to nudge things more northwest to get more polar flow to come down into the lower 48. And if we can do that, then we'll have some, quote, exciting weather. In the meantime, you see these disturbances, these blue areas, scooting across through the south. Eventually, one would assume that the two will link up. The polar jet, the subtropical jet with plenty of cold air. I mean, look at that as we get out towards January the 10th. Wow, that's very, very deep longitudinal cold, you would think, for the lower 48. We'll just have to see if the upper pattern and the surface pattern will reflect a big storm system in the coming weeks or so. Looking at the GFS at the surface map, which is got the precip here. Blue is snow and frozen precip. I like this because it's just real easy to pick out where the storms are. Again, Dr. Levi Cowan doing such a great job with this interface. Kind of boring looking over the next couple of weeks overall. Now right there, this is interesting, January 2nd, only about a week out. Maybe, just maybe, this is starting to hint at something that we have to watch. If there's more cold air, especially if we get some cold air damming in here east of the mountains, maybe some wintry precip for North Carolina, South Carolina, the upstate area, parts of the Virginia, Piedmont area, east of the Appalachians, but then that low scoots out. Why does it just scoot on out like that? This is what we call a progressive pattern, because we don't have enough blocking way up here over Greenland, way off the map, to sort of slow everything down and make these turn the corner. That's what you have to have. And you see, it's very similar to hurricanes. When we are looking to see if we have a pattern that is favorable for hurricanes to hit the United States, it is identifiable 5, 10, 15 days out. You look at the pattern and you say, okay, that is a pattern where something could hit the U.S., and then you see if there's a hurricane that's in that pattern. Back in 2022, we saw the pattern many days out that was ripe for something to come in late September, and that would be in the Gulf of Mexico, Northwest Caribbean area, and that's when we had Ian. So the pattern built, and then we had Ian, and Ian fed into that pattern. Winter storms are very similar. You got to have the pattern set up. They're not just random. You got to have the pattern, and then you see if the pattern generates the storm. It's not the other way around. Sometimes big storms can flip the pattern, but oftentimes, more often than not, the pattern dictates the weather. And, you know, this is going to be a little bit of an interesting situation here. This low that tracks across innocuously enough from Texas, you see it right there, and then it comes off, it looks like the Appalachians could get some snow, and then it comes off the coast, but it's just too progressive, not enough blocking. You got to suppress the pattern enough so that everything will turn the corner and come up the coast, if you like such things. Some people are not a fan of winter weather, so you got to be careful not to sort of wish for it too much, because it does have its own set of problems. Anyway, over the next week as we get into early 24, still looks like a fairly benign pattern for storminess overall. In fact, Thursday the 4th, Wednesday night into Thursday, the 3rd into the 4th, that is a pretty quiet weather map overall. I think you could agree. So that's a look at current weather and a little bit of a peek into next year. One of the big things we're going to be watching for as we really look at 2024, mainly because we are HurricaneTrack, right? What will the pattern be like, speaking of patterns, for next year's hurricane season? And I have made it almost a trademark of mine, you know, just figuratively speaking, that these are puzzle pieces. And we're trying to identify these pieces, put them together, see how they fit, and then see what the picture is. And then is that picture clear, or did the puzzle you put together is it a blurry picture? And I mean, seriously, sometimes that's the case. Sometimes you get puzzle pieces, like we had in 2023, you put them all together, and the picture was still kind of blurry. What do I mean by that? We had the record warm Atlantic, the strong El Nino that came on. That was pretty evident. In other words, that's the picture. But the picture was blurry because we had never been there before. That's the truth. We had never had a setup like 2023, where we had a record warm Atlantic. It was just off the charts warm, pretty much everywhere. And the El Nino that came on, we had never dealt with that. There was no analog to look back on and say, oh, okay, this fits a certain pattern. In this pattern, X, Y, and Z should happen, and we will be ready for it. That wasn't the case at all. So the picture was still blurry. Next year, I think, as I sit here today on December 27th, that the picture will be clearer. And that picture will probably be one that says, we have a favorable Atlantic, we're going to lose this, this will become at least cold neutral, if not La Nina, and that should, based on prior knowledge, using hindcast skills, analogs, all that kind of stuff, tell us that we have a clear picture that the environment should support a lot of hurricanes in the Atlantic, Caribbean, and Gulf in 2024. Whether or not that comes to fruition, of course, we will just have to wait and see in real time once we get to June and beyond. But that's what we're going to be watching. We'll do this once a week. These updates will start weekly, once again on Monday. Through the holidays, it's more erratic, but that's fine. So yes, each Monday, unless I'm busy, sick, working elsewhere out of the office, we're going to do this. We're going to look at this. We're going to watch the evolution of INSO, how the Atlantic is doing, especially through here, the tropics, and then we're going to go from there. Another piece of the puzzle, the SOI, this is all part of it. It continues to gradually go up, and a positive SOI is not conducive for El Nino. You understand? And our 30-day average now is at -4. That's half of what we were for November. We're starting to increase it overall. The 90-day average itself is less than the 30-day average for November. This is significant. The 90-day average is now just a little bit under the magic -7 that the Bureau of Meteorology typically associates with an atmosphere-ocean coupling regime conducive to El Nino. So we are on our way out of the overall pattern that gave us this El Nino. It has already started. So this will start to decline, and I can show you more evidence of that. This is the CFS V2. Its forecast and its ensembles clearly showing a rapid decline out of El Nino into La Nina territory, possibly by the summer. And the faster that happens, and as the Atlantic stays warm, assuming it does, the seasonal forecasts for numbers and potential impacts, we'll have to think about steering. That's very hard to do way out ahead of time. You know, the patterns and whatnot, those are easy to identify, but then the steering, I mean, even 5 days out, 2 days out, that's almost impossible. But the setup looks like we're going to have a busy season next year. We look at the subsurface data, look at all of this subsurface cold that is just waiting to go. These areas up here, these positive anomalies, those days are numbered. It's going to be fascinating to watch this in the weeks and months to come. And we're going to lose that El Nino, it seems, in pretty short order. And next year's hurricane season has potential to be very busy. This will have an impact on severe weather next year in the Great Plains. By the way, on Monday, this coming Monday, I will be talking about much more, sort of some reveals for you. I'll tease it and set it up now. Some ideas we've got going into next year, what we plan on doing for hurricane season, just a few extra things that we will be adding to our arsenal, and then a major project that we have hatched that we will start working on for spring severe weather season in the Great Plains, something I've had sort of milling around in the old noodle up here for several years, and I'm finally in the position to make it happen. And I think you're going to be pretty impressed and excited about it as I announce that on Monday. We've talked about it a little bit on our Patreon, and some of our close supporters, they know, because they're the ones that are going to help invest in it, of course. But for you all in the general public, yeah, it's going to be really exciting. And something, I will say this, that I think is sorely, sorely needed. And I think you're going to be really excited about it. So tune in on Monday as I drop that news for you. All right? And we got our calendar. I've got a few of them left. I looked over in the box. I think I got like 14 of them left. The 2024 wall calendar. Get it while you can. Only $20. That includes the shipping. It's not $20 plus $8.95. No, 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 no. $20 including shipping. I'll put it in a nice brown flat envelope, send it to you. It's 8.5 by 11. Probably make the one next year that larger size, whatever that is. Typically the ones you buy at Walmart or from calendars.com. But this is my first one. I'm proud of it. It turned out well. A few pictures of examples of pictures that are in it. Of course, there's 12 of them. I just put a few of them on here to show you. And it represents all the different stuff we've been doing, especially over the last 9 years, where we have really branched out beyond severe hurricanes into severe weather, nor'easters, that kind of thing. And little notes in there like, what does this mean right here? Why does it have a sign of thickly settled? We got to get the calendar and read the little note that's on the calendar part. You know how they do that, describing the photo. So get yours. There's the link right there, HurricaneTrack.com. Actually, the premium site. I'll put a link in the description. I'll make it easy for you. Just click on it in the description of today's video, and you can get one for yourself or as a gift. And probably until about the second week of January, I'll keep pitching these, and then it's almost too late. Then we're in 2024 already, right? Right. And I am going to be doing a lot more on Patreon. This is very important here. last year, 2023, Patreon made it so that creators, that's me, were able to let people join. Right there, it says join for free. That is awesome. I really like that. So you can join and then become a part of our community in sort of the entry level, if you will, where you can see any post that I make that's available for everybody. Some posts, of course, are for the investors. That's what everybody is. They're investors in this whole project. But you can join for free, and then when something piques your interest, oh, I want to see that coverage, or you know what, I'm in a financial position where I could support the project for 6 months or a year, then you can choose one of the tiers that start at $4 a month and go from there, depending on what your level of comfort is, all the way up to $100 a month if you so desire. All right? So really cool. We're going to be doing much more on Patreon with posting there, treating it very much like our own little micro social media universe. And our Discord, of course, is part of that at the $4 level and up. I wish we could make Discord available to everybody, but you know what happens when a social media platform is available to everybody at no cost. It's just uncontrollable. So you got to have a valve on it somehow. Also, next year, speaking of 2024, National Tropical Weather Conference, I'm going to be a presenter. Looking forward to that very much. You should go too, if you can. It's mainly for broadcast meteorologists, but it doesn't, they'll take anybody. It's geared for broadcast meteorology, helping to get the message out, clear messaging, especially with social media these days, not just your legacy TV, where you sit down and watch a show. National Tropical Weather Conference next year in South Padre. I will also be presenting with Dr. Phil Klotzbach at the National Hurricane Conference the week before this conference. That's going to be in Orlando. So this guy is going to be very busy next year, and that's an understatement. But that's coming up in April 2nd through the 4th, down in South Padre. And when you're done, you can go over to inland areas of Texas and catch the eclipse on Monday, April 8th. You should do that. All right? There you go. So 2024, be interesting to see if that's how it all turns out. I got a feeling next year is going to be quite active on so many levels, from the weather to politics, already is, global affairs, you name it. We're just going right along. Here at HurricaneTrack, though, we're going to keep you informed on all things weather. We check politics at the door. We don't do that here. Hey, I'm not qualified, all right? And we're weather focused anyway. We want to make sure you're ready for a scene like that. We've got a lot of ideas, a lot of partners that we work with, a lot of smart people that help us to do what we do, and we're looking forward to doing more of that in the next year. All right? So from me personally, my family, all of us here at the HurricaneTrack family, and my own family here in my household and beyond, my adult kids, all of us included, I appreciate you supporting the work over this past year. And for some of you, many years. Great to have you along. If you're new to the channel, hit that subscribe button. You get notified. However that works. Some people say it does and some people say it doesn't work. But at least subscribe to the channel so you'll know, hey, there's something new from HurricaneTrack in my feed. And of course, I'm on Twitter. I'll always call it Twitter, at HurricaneTrack. And I look forward to seeing you from all that we do on all those social media platforms. Alrighty, well, that's it for this year. Again, thanks a lot for everything, for following along, all your comments, your engagement. I am Mark Sudduth for HurricaneTrack. I'll talk to you again in the early part of 2024.